My sister and I are working on my car, doing the timing belt, and I see I have an oil leak along here on my oil pan. So I want to take care of that before I button up the timing belt. I'm draining the oil right now from the oil pan. That takes a 14 millimeter. I'm going to let that drain overnight. But I'll tell y'all, if you're working on a timing belt on third generation Toyotas, this is the 1995 Toyota Camry, and you have the crankshaft off, pulley, that's the time to replace the oil pan or to remove it and seal up any leaks. Oil drained overnight, and I'm putting the drain plug back in before I remove the pan. You also want to remove the dipstick so you don't break it when you're removing the pan. And y'all, when you're doing this job, wear safety glasses. There are 17 10 millimeter bolts around this oil pan. And there are 2 nuts like that one. They're really like locating studs, so it's easier for you to put the pan back on. There's one in that corner and one over here in this corner. This pan has bolts in it on every side except the driver's side wheel. So just think driver's side wheel and then you'll know what I'm talking about. On that side of the pan, there are no bolts. There are only 2 bolts at the 45. I'm trying to point to one there with some light. Right there. If you can see my finger, right there. There's one there and one on the opposing side. I had to remove, or I have to remove, the stiffener. That's the stiffener right here. There she is. There are 3 14 millimeter bolts. There's that one right up there. And then there are 2 under here. One is there and one's directly above it, offset a bit. I got to this one from below with a wrench. I got to that one I'm shining the light on from above. And then the other 14 millimeter that's right next to it on the side, right about over here. The reason I had to remove the stiffener is that little 10 millimeter bolt over there that I'm shining the light on. I had no tool to get to that if I didn't take the stiffener off. So that's why I took it off. All right, I'll show you the stiffener once it's out. You have little room in here, y'all. So you just got to work slowly to loosen that stiffener bolt. Soon I'm going to take it with a socket, back her out. I'm going to leave the lower 14 millimeter bolt in, so when I remove it, I can slide the stiffener plate out from the bottom. Lower bolt, 14 millimeter for the stiffener. All right, y'all, that's the stiffener plate. That's the lower bolt right there. She orients up like that. So I'd recommend taking the lower bolt out last, and then she just slides down. Now with the stiffener out of the way, I'm able to access that bolt right there, that 10 millimeter. So now I'm going to remove all of the 10 millimeter bolts and the 2 nuts. All right, y'all, I'm taking that bolt 10 millimeter with a 1/4 inch ratchet. Just going to loosen them all and then remove them. I've got access to these 3 10 millimeters on this side because I removed the splash guard, which those are the 2 bolts for the splash guard, because I'm doing my timing belt. I'm loosening all of them and then I'll take them all at one time. All right, y'all, you have 1 nut there that's at the front of the vehicle on the oil pan toward the driver's side, and 1 right back here, the rear of the vehicle or oil pan, passenger side. The rest are bolts. So here's the setup right now. All of them are loosened. I'm going to leave this plate in place right there with the foam insulator and see if I can drop this pan. If I can't, I will come back and remove this plate that this foam is attached to. So I'd recommend loosening all the bolts first and then easing them out with a socket. I have all the bolts out except 2, that one and that one. I'm taking them last. I'm going to take the front one first toward the front of the engine, this one last, just in case the pan comes down. That stud right there, the stud and the nut came out. That one up there, just the nut did, so I'll have to resolve that in a bit. All right, y'all, I'm gonna take this from the side because I have access, and I see that somebody has before and pried it. That's a big no-no. You're trying to not score the metal, right, on the pan or up here on the engine housing area. So I'm gonna use this plastic putty knife, try to break the seal, which I don't think I'll get anywhere, but mucho sorry. I'm gonna try. My big guess is whoever put this on before didn't clean anything off, because I can see the old sealant. And then if you're not going to do a good job, really what's the point of doing it, right? So as you all might have seen, the plastic putty knife laughed at me. This one's a little too flexible. I'm just going to break some seal here. And it is working to do that. All right, y'all, I'm just taking a putty knife and slowly working through that adhesive. And then it slides through, you see. So my advice would be slow and go. I wouldn't put anything in it to pry it and warp that pan. So I'm just putting that through a little bit at a time, breaking that seal. Be careful what you shove in there, because there are internals I'm not aware of that you could potentially harm. Y'all see how I'm working that? Just a little bit at a time, jiggling it back and forth, not straight in, but sideways as I can to break that seal. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it was working around the entire perimeter of that pan, the oil pan, with that putty knife, slowly, and now she's coming down. So you just got to take your time, go around it with a putty knife. I certainly would not pry it down as some people do. I think that's a recipe for disaster, and it will warp the pan. So she's going to come down now, and I got to have two hands for this. The pan's just hanging there for a bit. I'm coming in from the passenger side, and that's what it looks like. There you go. Oil pan is not going to come out if I don't remove this plate where the foam is. So to remove that plate right there, it's one 12 millimeter there, and another one right back there with a wrench. Then after you're the lucky recipient of doing that, there are two 10 millimeters right up there. There's one up there. I don't know if you can see it. One right there, and one right up there at that top. Right there, y'all. That you have to remove, and then this plate right here slides down with the foam piece intact. So I have to do that to get the pan out. The pan's hitting up against something. We suspect the pins, because Sister's here for reinforcements. So I can't get it out. So that's what I'm doing now. That 10 millimeter bolt right there, you need a wrench for. And it helps if you have a little cheater bar off to the side. Not much room to work down here, y'all. That little 10 millimeter, I had to take from above with a 1/4 inch ratchet and a 10 millimeter. It's kind of tough to get to, y'all, but it was easiest to take it from above, and then I'll loosen it more underneath and take it out. All right, y'all, the plate is coming down now. This little guy. Here's what happened. It would not come down, wouldn't release. Why? The last person who did this job adhesed it. That's right, they did. So if your plate right here is not coming off, the plate with the foam on it right there, you're gonna have to use a putty knife to remove adhesive, because perhaps somebody did it and glued it to it. I'm going to slide that plate down so those pegs are no longer in the way. The pegs hold the foam on, and then bring that pan down. All right, y'all, the pan is down. That's what it looks like underneath. If y'all put too much sealant on the pan when you're putting it in, over toward the driver's side, over that way, where there aren't any bolts, you're going to glue that to the plate that comes off the side there, and also that foam. So be careful about putting too much goop on this when you put it back in. And that's the pan right there. Now I'm going to clean her up. See these pieces right here, y'all? These right here? There were a couple more in here. If you put on too much sealant and it goes inside that pan, that's what you're going to have in that pan. It can break loose. See how much that is? That didn't break loose. Those did, and some other pieces that I've thrown away. So I would caution you to not put excessive sealant on this pan when you're putting it back in. I'm just taking a little piece of wood like this and going along and cleaning the surface because I don't want to scratch it. And it's working really well. You can use a razor if you'd like, but don't scratch this mating surface. See that stuff coming off? This works really well. And if I need to, I'll take a wire brush to it to clean more, just the minor residue left on. Then I'm going to use denatured alcohol to clean the mating surface and make sure it's really clean. See that coming off? It comes off really well. I don't care for brake cleaner if I can avoid it. So if you don't have this, just break a paint stick in two and use it. All right, y'all, I took a piece of cardboard, just a cereal box cut, and put it right there so that when I take all of this adhesive off, the sealant, it doesn't get in that area. I am using a pipe cleaner to clean out these screw holes. Like that. And then I'll take the clean end, put some denatured alcohol on it, and go back through each hole. The mating surface is getting very clean. Now there is sealant in those holes, so it's a good idea to clean them out. Now I'm just cleaning up the pan. What I'm using is a dental tool. I've used them for years. I get them from my dentist for DIYing. And they're really effective. It doesn't scratch the surface if you learn how to work with them. I have a little denatured alcohol on this paper towel. That's what I'm using to clean the surfaces. Denatured alcohol. It's priceless if you DIY a lot. It's a very good cleaner. See how quick that denatured alcohol dries? It's got a high flash point and dries really quick. Make sure you get all that sealant off, so you have a nice clean surface to mate that new sealant to and to adhere it to. Now I'm going to clean the inside of the pan and the mating area. I prefer to use a putty knife and not a razor. I can control it a little bit better, and it seems to work really well, both on the surface and in these little channels. RTV, silicone, those type of sealants. Once they start to skin or cure, particularly cure, nothing else will stick to it, including the sealant or silicone itself. So you have to make sure you get all of this old sealant out of these channels and off of the mating surface of this pan, or your job will fail and you'll have to go in and do it again. I think many people use a razor, but I just don't like the lack of control with a razor and that you can gouge the surface. Y'all see that area on the oil pan that I'm shining a light on, that silver looking area? That area may be leaking. And so I got a new oil pan. I cleaned this whole pan up. That was warped right there on that side because the person before yanked it down right there, y'all. We straightened the pan. It would have been flat enough to put it back up. But that ding right there, I believe, is a leak area that they gooped up on inside and out. So I got a new pan off of eBay for, I think it was $50.44, believe it or not, brand new Toyota pan, model number 12101-03031. Toyota, by the way, wanted $240 for a brand new pan, so I saved a lot of money. But I didn't want to put a pan back in that may be leaking. I'm cleaning up the bolts before I put the pan back on. The bolts have quite a bit of sealant on them. So I put the bolt in some vice grips. Take a wire brush. Then I take a little paper towel with denatured alcohol on it. Clean the thread side. So I'd remove all the sealant off the screws prior to putting the pan back in. Okay, y'all, two things. One, when I removed the bolts from the block side for the oil pan, the stud came out. So whoever did this last over torqued it, and I can't get that nut off. So I've ordered another one from Toyota. In fact, I've ordered several of them, 4. I've ordered extra ones because I'm going to use these as locators when I put my pan in. So it's easier to locate because it has that sealant on and you've got to work and have that pan in place within 15 minutes. So these are going to be my locator studs, but I have to replace that and the nut. Secondly, this foam insulator was broken off before. That's the way it was when I got to it. So I'm taking some wire. It's just a piece of wire I have hanging around. And I cut it. Straightened it and cut it. And now I'm going to put a little loop on it, bend it back like that at 90 degrees. A little more than 90. Now I'm going to put it right in here on the side of that foam to keep that foam in place. Just like that. So I'm going to put that down right there. Now I'm going to take another piece of wire and put it up through here and do the same thing, but I'm going to loop it or 90 it up the top and the bottom so that this stays in place. I'm not going to buy a new part for that. So it'll fit right over there and then stay in place like that. You see that right there? The pan is hitting that. That's within the engine area. It also hits right up there along that mating surface. So I can't put it back in with sealant on it because it'll touch that area and that right there. And this is up against this is toward the driver's side. That's the exhaust in the way right there. The 14 millimeter to drop the exhaust a bit so I can get the pan back in. So I could get it out with a struggle, but I can't get it back in. Now, people far smarter than me can probably do this without dropping everything. But that, unless you drop the exhaust, that will get in your way and take off the sealant. And so will the mating surface right there. I'm using 2 6-inch extensions, 14 millimeter deep socket, and a 1/2 inch an adapter here and a 1/2 inch ratchet to try to break the nuts up there on that. I put silicone lubricant spray on those. All right, y'all, you see that extension? Those extensions, 14 millimeter right there? We're on one of those nuts. There you go, she got it. Okay, sister's got the ratchet 14 millimeter and extensions on that last one. She's broken the other two. We want you to see how she does it so you'll know how to do it. Okay, what y'all need to do, she's gonna keep that hand. She's using her right hand to pull the ratchet this way. She's got a cheater bar on it. With her left hand, she's keeping the head of that ratchet up and forcing it and pushing that way. You need opposing forces or you're gonna break something. So watch her do it, y'all. There you go. She broke it free. She's a strong old bird, y'all. All those nuts up there on that exhaust are now loose. So we tried to film it for you so we can give you an idea of how to do this. But that exhaust needs to be dropped to get the pan back in, y'all. If you do it like other people do, and you try to put the pan back in without dropping the exhaust, what's going to happen is some of your sealant is going to end up on all over in there. And I know it will because that's what I had to clean off. The goal is to drop that exhaust down a bit. A couple inches is all I need. If not, I'm going to have to release the bracket right back. Whoop. Right back there. First, I'm just going to drop those nuts, those 3 nuts, and bring the exhaust down as much as I can. And see if I can get a couple of inches. This braided thing right here, there you go, see that? That's flexible. It may allow me enough flex to drop that exhaust pipe a bit to be able to get that oil pan in. And y'all, when you're doing this, you want to put a plastic bag like that around. That's just a produce bag with tape on it. I put that around the exhaust because as you work on getting the sealant off the engine side, it's going to drip. And if it drips onto that exhaust, when you finish your job and start your car, it's going to smoke quite a bit. So I just put a produce bag there to stop that. I'm loosening these nuts now, just taking them out by hand with the extensions in the socket. When you're doing this, if you meet with resistance, like the nut doesn't want to come out, what you do is you tighten it back up just a little bit and then loosen it more. Tighten it back up a little bit and loosen it more. You go back and forth until that nut wants to come. Because if you force it, you can strip the threads or break that stud up there. So just back and forth a little bit at a time. Also, silicone lubricant goes a long way to help you get that that nut off. All the 3 nuts are off. Those are the nuts that come off, y'all, that came off the exhaust. There you go. We marked them so that we know the location they go back in. Now we're going to try to get the exhaust down a little bit here to give me a couple more inches to get the pan in right up there. You all see that bracket? That's located just about where the firewall is going into the compartment, into the inside of the car. Those are 2 12 millimeter bolts on either side. I have to release those and that bracket and bring it down. All right, y'all, these loosen really, really easily. There's not much torque on them. That's the setup right there, holding the exhaust. So all you need to do is remove that bracket, the 2 12 millimeters, and it'll come down, something to support it. Then the exhaust. This part right here, y'all, that's braided is flexible a little bit. Don't pull it too much, but it does flex. Put a bungee cord around this exhaust and pull it toward the driver's side. Get it out of your way so when you're putting the pan in, it's not in your way. Y'all see those my sister's holding? I went to Toyota. You know that I have 1 stripped stud bolt. Well, I've got a total of 4 stud bolts. I got 1 to replace the one that was stripped and or that came out when I took the pan down, and I got 3 additional ones. We're using 2 additional ones, right? One right there, and one, again, don't know what y'all can see, one right up there as locator. There it is, great bit. As locator studs, so that when we put the pan on, we can just ease them onto those locator studs, and then when the pan is on and I've got some fasteners in, some of the bolts in, I'm just gonna take those stud bolts out. It's just so helpful, y'all. So we'd recommend getting some extra bolts at Toyota, stud bolts, so you can use as locators. It just goes up so much easier. So now you can, if you want to, put one in the back. Again, get extra ones and dry run your pan so you understand how many locating stud bolts you need and where you want them. All right, y'all, that's the part number for the additional stud bolts, 90116-06022. I would get 4 additional stud bolts, or 3 if you don't have one stripped. That's the part number, 90182-A like Adam 0010, for the nuts you need. 2 nuts if you have one like mine that was stripped and you can't use it. All right, y'all, that's the stiffener out with the 3 14mm bolts. I've cleaned it up before putting it back in. This is that plate that goes up against the converter with the piece of foam that I put some wire in to hold it back together because somebody had torn it before. So I put some over there and over there. And it fits snugly between this plate and the oil pan. This is a better shot of how we have this set up after dropping the exhaust, the front exhaust. We have an Amazon box right there with a couple of pieces of wood to help us support that exhaust now and while we're working on putting in the pan. The plate that I just showed you goes up against that right there. Oil pan goes up here. The stiffener goes right up there. The 3 nuts on the front exhaust right there that we took out, that comes off that part. That part Toyota calls the warm-up 3-way catalytic converter. So we're supporting the front exhaust right here and getting it out of the way, pushing it a little bit toward the driver's side. Because remember, this braided metal part is flexible, but not too flexible, but it gives you a little flex movement. We're using bungee cords on this front exhaust pipe to get it down and toward the driver's side a bit so that when we put in the pan, we'll have more room. We have the bungee cords going right over there to the front hook of the car on the driver's side, right over there. We didn't put it up yesterday because it was very low humidity and strong north wind, which would have dried that sealant quicker than we wanted to. Our work time on it wouldn't have been as much as it will be today, and it's cooler today. And without a north wind, the humidity's pretty good. So that's a shot right there of the mating surface cleaned and the engine side that the pan's going up against. So I hope you learn from my mistakes and drop that exhaust early on. It's not difficult, y'all. So were I to do this again, starting from the beginning, first thing I'd do is drop the exhaust, meaning the 3 14mm nuts there. Release the bracket back there, the 2 12mm, and it'll come down, have something to support it. Then I would remove the stiffener, which will go right up here. Then I would remove this plate with a piece of foam on it. The plate has pins on it that protrude out, that hold the foam on. So if you don't get those out of the way, it's real difficult to get that pan out because it drops and hits that. That would allow me plenty of room with this exhaust drop down to release all of the bolts and the 2 nuts on the oil pan and just bring it right down. But she's gonna go in and have a good seal now. Y'all, we're doing a dry run of the old pan to see what we can do here. I'm coming over here. Sister's got it on the passenger side. I've got it on the driver's side. We have 3 additional locating bolts. There you go. We encourage you to dry run it several times. and add the additional pegs. The additional locating stud bolts really, really help. I really don't see doing it precisely without it. Most of ours are in the rear or on the passenger side because up in front here toward the front of the vehicle, you can't see when you're doing this. One, it's dark, and two, there's just not enough room. All right, y'all, I'm doing a final clean on the mating surface, engine side, denatured alcohol paper towel. You want to pay particular attention to this area right here. That oil from the engine will want to come down and drip like this on that mating surface. So make sure you get those 90s right there and clean them off before you put that pan on. Final cleaning around the mating surface of the pan, goop on it, and we're putting that pan up. This is what's recommended by Toyota, and this is what we're using. Toyota Seal Packing 103. You see that? You have 15 minutes to assemble after application. That's the instructions for how to put the sealant on the oil pan. Right there. Again, you have 15 minutes to get this oil pan on.
You can see how firmly that stood up.
Yep.
They mean 15 minutes.
Yep. Our advice would be to do it when it's not hot, it's early in the morning. All right, y'all, now I've got to cut this and set this up so you can see what's happening. All right, y'all, here we go. Putting that pan on. Support. Got it over here. When you're ready, I'm ready.
Yeah, don't see my. There it is. Okay, I'm ready.
Go. She's on. Y'all need to have paper towels to put these bolts in. That one comes out.
Okay, it's coming out then.
And this one's coming out. We're taking the locating studs out now. Just screwing in the bolts to hand tight and those two nuts. Get them all hand tight, y'all. And torque them to 48 inch-pounds. The bolts that are tough, obviously, are the ones that are toward the converter. A little difficult to get to. We're torquing them to 48 inch-pounds. Crisscross pattern, y'all. There y'all go. She's in. She's chilling. You allow 30 minutes to 60 minutes before driving. I'd never do that. I'd wait 24 hours. Hardens to become rubber-like in 15 to 16 hours. 24 hours is when I'm going to put my oil in. Beautiful. Y'all see that? It's really nice. I'm going to let the sealant dry 24 hours before I put the plate back in with the foam insulation on it. All right, y'all. That's the exhaust gasket right there. I'm going to replace that. From AutoZone, I got a Felpro exhaust gasket. 23626. That's the exhaust gasket I just took off my car. This is the new Felpro. So I line them up, and they line up perfectly. I cleaned around the surface of that flange right there, and then put the gasket on. Now I'm going to put on the plate with the foam on it. 2 10 millimeters right there, and the 2 12s down here. Sneak it past the exhaust. Putting the 2 10 millimeter bolts in. Just going to put them in with an extension, a socket. I don't have a torque spec on those 2 10 millimeter bolts, so I'm going to tighten them snug and a little more. After you put the two 10mm bolts in, put your 12mm bolts in. I don't have a torque on those either. I'm going to tighten them to snug and a little more. There you go. It's time to put the stiffener in. I'm going to put in the top bolt right there, that one from the top. On the 14mm stiffener bolts, 27 foot-pounds of torque. We're there. I put the 3 nuts on the stud bolts for the exhaust there, just hand tight. Those torque 246 foot-pounds. I'd recommend you get the exhaust on those 3 stud bolts before you tighten those two 12mm bolts right there, the bracket. But if y'all don't get those nuts on those stud bolts first and that exhaust up, it's going to be difficult to do it after you put in those two 12mm on that bracket toward the back. I'm going to tighten the two 12mm first, and then I'm going to tighten those 3 nuts to 46 foot-pounds. No torque on these, so tighten them and a little more. That's it. I'm tightening these exhaust nuts with just the socket and some extensions first. There you go. The 3 nuts are torqued to 46 foot-pounds. The exhaust is back on with the new gasket. We're going to wait 24 hours to put oil in it, and then pray. We're going to pray that it don't leak, y'all. All right, we're over and out. That's how I reseal an oil pan or replace an oil pan on a Toyota Camry, 3rd generation 5S-FE engine. Hope it helps, and happy DIYing.